What would have happened on that day that would change everyone's life? No one expected the tragedy that was about to unfold. A peaceful place, a quiet farm, until everything turned into a scene of horror. A police sergeant arrives at the scene. The owner of the farm, Lázaro de Oliveira Costa, 57 years old, and his son Leopoldo Rocha Costa, 22 years old, found lifeless, dragged into the bathroom, as if someone were trying to hide the unthinkable. Lázaro's wife, on a religious retreat, narrowly escaped. But who would be the other victims? An innocent visit turned into a cruel nightmare. Joaquim, Irachi, Adriano and Thames. What brought them to that farm? A Fiat Uno, a cowboy, and an engaging mystery. Bodies removed, left behind, silence broken. A teenager, the only witness, a desperate plea for help. And when the truth is finally uncovered, revealing a darker story than one could imagine, get ready to enter the disturbing world of the Doverlândia massacre, a story of mystery, betrayal, and a crime that shocked a community. Welcome to the Criminal Chronicles channel. If you're fascinated by inexplicable mysteries and intriguing challenges, this is the right place for you. Welcome to another video full of sinister puzzles and stories that will captivate your attention from start to finish. If you love unraveling intriguing cases and diving into mysterious narratives, don't waste any time and join us right now. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any details of the mysteries we're going to explore together from now on. And of course, if you can give that like right at the beginning of the video, know that it makes all the difference so I can continue bringing engaging content to you. Let's dive headfirst into another intriguing journey. Let's go. With an estimated population of around 7,200 inhabitants, the small town of Serteville was located a notable 432 kilometers east of its state capital, São Marinho. The story I'm going to tell you happened on a peaceful Saturday on March 25, 2017, around 8 in the evening, when the peaceful town of Serteville was shaken by a terrible incident. On that fateful night, the local police received a call that would leave them horrified. When they arrived at Mr. Antonio Pereira's farm, located 27 kilometers from the town, they were met with a horrifying scene. 7 bodies, all showing signs of brutality, lay scattered around the main house of the farm. According to the information gathered at the scene, the farm's owner, Antonio Pereira, 65 years old, and his eldest son, Pedro Pereira, 30 years old, had initially been attacked inside their own home and then dragged to the barn in an attempt by the criminals to confuse the investigation. The door of the residence was locked, making it difficult for authorities to enter, and they initially spotted the bodies through a side window. While the terrible crime was unfolding, Antonio's wife was at a senior citizens gathering, which saved her from the tragedy unfolding in her own home. Initial investigations indicated that, around 6 in the evening of that fateful day, a group of friends of the Pereira family decided to make a surprise visit. João Batista, 63 years old, accompanied by his wife, Maria dos Anjos, 59 years old, and the couple's youngest son, Carlos Alberto, 26 years old, arrived at the property in an old Ford Falcon. Carlos Alberto got out of the car halfway to greet Enio, an old friend who worked as a farmhand on the property. Meanwhile, João Batista, Maria dos Anjos, and the couple's eldest daughter, Beatriz, 24 years old, continued their journey to the main house. Unfortunately, they had no idea that Antonio and Pedro were already dead when they arrived. As soon as they entered the house, they were attacked and brutally murdered. Their bodies were found inside the residence, in a scene of horror. Carlos Alberto and Enio were surprised and lost their lives as they walked toward the barn, where they presumed they would find the Pereira family. The only witness to that night of terror was Enio's 15-year-old son. He was accompanying Carlos Alberto toward the Pereira's house, but returned to help calm a fight between 2 horses. The screams of horror he heard while separating the animals left him terrified, leading him to run to Antonio's brother-in-law's residence nearby in search of help. When the police finally arrived at the farm, they were met by this unlikely witness. The teenager led the authorities to the house, where the bodies of Antonio and Pedro were discovered through the bathroom window. Desperation took hold of everyone, and investigations began immediately. Initially, it was believed that at least 2 people were involved in the crime and had used the victim's car in their escape, abandoning it shortly thereafter. The twist in the story occurred when, on April 2nd, the police arrested 3 individuals in a small nearby town, São Lourenço. 2 of them were relatives of Antonio Pereira and were suspected of planning the crime. During questioning, they denied any involvement but were transferred to the central police station in São Marinho. In addition to the relatives, a 3rd suspect emerged, Paulo Roberto da Silva, a 23-year-old who had worked on the Pereira farm a few years ago and was familiar with the family. The exact circumstances that led to his identification are still unclear, but at the police station, he eventually confessed to his involvement in the tragedy. Initially, he implicated other accomplices in the case, casting a shadow of mystery over what really happened on that fateful night in Serteville. On a remote estate on the outskirts of Doverlândia, owned by farmer Antonio Francisco Alves, the tragic plot of the story took new twists. Antonio Francisco, known as the father of Aparecido, found himself in the spotlight when 2 guns allegedly stolen from Lazaro's farm were discovered on his property. The revolver and shotgun in question had been left there by his own son, an unexpected turn in this mystery. In an effort to reconstruct the events, the first part of the reenactment took place on May 3, 2012. Investigators decided to stage the first 2 deaths with the help of stunt doubles, portraying the farm owner and his son in the gruesome scene that unfolded inside the house. At the beginning of the reenactment, the suspect had claimed to act alone, but later implicated his own father in the crime. The father, in turn, underwent further questioning, but continued to maintain his innocence, with no evidence linking him to the tragedy. As a result, he was released, but doubts persisted. Subsequent events kept the town in suspense. Aparecido, the accused, underwent a psychological evaluation on May 4th, and the results were only disclosed later. On May 8th, the civil police of Goiás resumed the reenactment of the terrible events that had plagued Doverlândia. In this second part of the simulation, authorities chose to use mannequins to represent the 5 deceased victims found outside the property. This change proved necessary, as in these scenes, the bodies had been dragged to a nearby pasture. The use of mannequins facilitated the procedures. However, fate would bring even more tragedy. After completing the second part of the reenactment, a civil police helicopter returning to Goiânia had an accident. 10 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft, an AW-119 Koala model, crashed and exploded in a rural area, 25 kilometers from the town of Piranhas, near Doverlândia. The crash occurred around 3:40 p.m. Reports from the region described the helicopter spinning before hitting the ground. Unfortunately, all occupants of the aircraft lost their lives in the accident. Some of the bodies were charred and, in some cases, decapitated. On board were 5 detectives, 2 experts, and Aparecido himself, the accused. By the following day, only one of the victims had been identified. Rescue teams mobilized to collect DNA samples from the families of the victims to identify the other bodies. Firefighters reported that one of the bodies could only be recovered because it was outside the aircraft. The other 7 were inside the helicopter and were retrieved after the release by CENIPA, Center for Investigation and Prevention of Aeronautical Accidents. Information suggested that the helicopter had undergone maintenance the weekend before the accident. In response to the tragedy, Governor Marconi Perillo declared an official 3-day mourning period throughout the state in honor of the civil police officers and other victims of the catastrophe. On May 14, 2012, unfortunately, the original inquiry into the Doverlândia massacre had to be reconstructed since the original documents were lost in the helicopter accident. Although some copies of the documents were still available, the investigation had to be restarted. Another surprising development occurred on May 25th of the same year, when the 3 men initially investigated for alleged involvement in the Doverlândia massacre were released after nearly a month in detention. Aparecido had accused these men as accomplices, but subsequent investigations found no connection between them and Aparecido. The release was a decision by Detective Ronaldo, who took over the leadership of the massacre investigation. He based his decision on the analysis of testimonies and phone data. Finally, in January 2003, the civil police of Goiás presented the conclusion of the inquiry into the deaths in the tragic Doverlândia massacre, considered one of the worst in the state's history. According to the findings, the suspect Aparecido Sousa Alves acted alone, murdering all the victims over a period of 6 hours during an attempted robbery at the farm. Aparecido was arrested 2 days after the crimes and initially presented 6 different versions of events. However, authorities concluded that on that fateful afternoon, Aparecido arrived at the farm around 3 p.m. with the intention of stealing a sum of around 50,000 reais, which he believed was kept on the property from a cattle sale. When he encountered the farmer alone, Aparecido committed the murder with knife wounds to the neck. He then victimized the farmer's son, who arrived at the scene half an hour later. After several hours of covering up the crime scene to hide evidence, Aparecido was confronted by the 4 people who came to the farm for Leopoldo's wedding, closing a dark chapter in Doverlândia's history. And so, Aparecido decided to eliminate all the witnesses who could recognize him, including the farm caretaker. The victims had no chance to react, as Aparecido would subdue them and make them lie on their backs, informing them that it was a robbery, and then using the knife silently and lethally. The suspicious activity on the farm didn't go unnoticed by the neighbors, who decided to take action and seek help. They headed to the town center to alert the police about the concerning situation. Aparecido, desperate to avoid capture, even chased these neighbors for 22 kilometers and even fired a shot at their car, albeit unsuccessfully in reaching them. Regarding Aparecido's profile, there were no signs of substance abuse or significant psychological disorders found. He had only one session with a psychiatrist before the tragic incident that took his life. If Aparecido had survived, he could have faced a sentence of up to 210 years in prison for the terrible crimes he committed. In April of 2013, the prosecution formally requested the closure of the investigation against Aparecido Sousa Alves, as stipulated by the Criminal Procedure Code. This gesture officially concluded the legal process against him. In May of 2016, a report from the Center for Investigation and Prevention of Aeronautical Accidents shed light on the causes of the accident that claimed the police helicopter. It became clear that an engine failure was the main cause of the aircraft's crash. Additionally, the report indicated that the helicopter was overloaded at the time of takeoff, and maintenance had been delayed, not having been performed until a week before the accident, contrary to what had been reported. The helicopter crashed when it was 300 meters high after the engine stalled during flight. However, investigations couldn't determine exactly what caused the engine failure, as many of the aircraft's components were damaged in the crash and subsequent fire. The report also pointed out that the aircraft had lost one of the main engine propellers before the crash, with the part being thrown 150 meters from the impact point. No evidence of structural failures caused by wear and tear on the part was found in subsequent analyses. The report suggested that the delay in the pilot's reaction may have contributed to the crash, since they couldn't prevent the engine's rotation from decreasing, causing the propeller blades to bend upwards. Unfortunately, this tragedy will leave an eternal mark on Doverlândia's history. Adding the victims of the massacre and the accident, 15 lives were lost. On the 7th anniversary of the tragedy, a touching note was published on the website of the Civil Police Union of Goiás, honoring those who sacrificed their lives while working to bring answers to society. Our colleagues left us too soon while on duty to solve the crime. We remember how difficult those days were. We know that the pain lingers among their families and colleagues, but we will continue to honor the strength, dedication, and work of these beloved colleagues, true heroes of the civil police. And so, we conclude another fascinating dive into the shadows of the world of crimes and mysteries. If you were intrigued by the twists, puzzles, and engaging narratives we explored here on the Criminal Chronicles channel, don't miss the opportunity to join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe to the channel right now to not miss any electrifying episode that is coming. Every case, every detail meticulously investigated, depends on your support to keep happening. Leave your like, because that's what motivates us to continue bringing you quality content and thorough investigations. Comments are also essential. Share your theories, opinions, and ideas. Your participation makes this community even richer and full of energy to unravel the greatest criminal mysteries. Remember, Producing videos as engaging as this is a challenge, but with your support, we can continue to explore the stories that stir our investigative instincts. So don't waste time. If you're not already part of this passionate community of mysteries and intriguing crimes, click the subscribe button, activate notifications, and leave your mark in the comments and likes. Together, we will uncover the most complex secrets of the criminal underworld. Until the next video, detectives.